Yeah, because there's only like one bus that does it, and it stops like 10 times in between.
So, but do you really bring funding with you, or you bring sources with you, or you
Just strange. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, are you? Yeah. Yes, I have you. Yeah.
Okay.
It's been interesting. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I have no idea what it's because
Interesting group of people.
I think we're going to go ahead and get started.
Yeah. Agreed. It's not very high on
I think we're going to go ahead and get
the
started at 4 o'clock, so we don't want to keep you here any longer than we need to. And last time we went over, there was great discussion at the end. My name is Jody Stephenson. I am co-chairing this session with Sehr. I'm from the Rockdale Foundation, and we'd like to take a moment for all of you to just go around the room, introduce yourself, say what organization you're with and where you are coming from. And then just so that you know, during the presentation, we are going to do a Facebook live feed of the presenters, but then after that, during the discussion, there won't be a live feed, so you can feel free to speak freely during that time. And you also have a list of everyone who's in this session as well, just so you can keep a reference there. But why don't we start over on this side of the room with introductions?
Yeah, sure. Angela Denneman from Itaú Social Foundation in Brazil.
I'm Fernanda. I'm from Brazil. I'm representing Itaú Social Foundation.
Graham Ranger, Agricom Academies, Academic Director based in France.
Chicago, I'm from a media network. I'm based in London, but I cover education investments in Africa.
I'm from Carlos Gulbenkian Foundation in Portugal, Lisbon, and Director for Education.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shiraz Chakir. I'm from UNICEF in the Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Office as an education specialist.
I'm Sehr Tejpar. I'm also a co-chair for this session, and I work for Agricom Foundation in Geneva.
I'm Yasmina Haynes. I'm CEO of Integrity Action.
I'm Diane Youngknet. I'm the founder of Wise Knows, which is education technology, and I flew in from Amsterdam.
I'm Daniel Tahta. I'm the Chief of Education for UNICEF Kenya Country Office.
Okay, I'm Leticia. I'm the head of partnerships, global partnerships in ProFuturo Foundation, and we are from Spain.
Okay, my name is Sofia. I'm General Director of Fundación ProFuturo, based also in Madrid.
Hi, my name is Michael Meaney. I'm a PhD student at the University of Cambridge.
And Margery Evans, I'm the Academic Director in the Agricom Education Services based in France.
So the way it's going to work much like the last roundtable that you were in, each of the presenters will have about 10 minutes, and then we're actually going to give them a bit of time to engage with each other's presentations, and then we will open it up to the broader group for questions and comments as well.
No, I think we're pretty good. Maybe we can explain to you a little bit about the theme of this session. So last week we had a chat with our 3 presenters, who we will hear from shortly, and together they came up with an interesting question that will frame their presentation. And I just want to present that to you now before you hear them speak, so that can guide your responses and questions to them. So the question, if we can get to the next slide. Yeah. Our question is, when the ambition for technology is yet unmet, how might we fulfill on the promise of EdTech? And we have 3 speakers. I know it kind of rhymes. We have 3 speakers. The first will be Michael Meaney, who's one of our essay winners, and he'll be setting up for us the challenge of technology. And Margery Evans from AKES will then speak about the right intentions for technology. And Sofia from ProFuturo Foundation in Spain will speak about a possible solution. So with that, we can begin with Mike.
Sure, thank you. I was just messaging people to watch on Facebook 'cause this is live, so forgive me. So my name is Mike Meaney. I'm a second-year PhD student at the University of Cambridge on the Gates Cambridge Scholarship. Formerly, I was an 8th grade science teacher in the southwestern United States in a very low-income school. And then I subsequently worked for the president of Arizona State University, working on creating educational technology solutions to education challenges. So that's how I got interested in this whole line of work. And I'm here to present some of my research that I'm working on, specifically on massive open online courses and other forms of open scale technology. So I'll kind of frame why I think this is important research, and then I'll talk about some of my initial findings, and then hopefully some ideas about what we can do moving forward. So there's two trends that really stimulate the importance of this kind of work. So the first that we've heard about a lot today is that the pace of technological transformation is increasing, and it's predicted that upwards of 50% of the current labor market will be automated out, and it's also hypothesized that the job losses will be concentrated on the lower end and sort of middle part of the skilled spectrum, meaning that those that are sort of already very vulnerable or at risk of being vulnerable are the most vulnerable as a result of this transformation. That coupled with the fact that right now there's 170 million people around the world in higher ed, that's projected to grow at like 33% over the next 5 years. And in India alone, or by 2025, and in India alone, it's projected that by 2025, there will be 150 million college-age students. And with India's current higher education physical infrastructure, it could only support 1/3 of them. So there's this real kind of big global supply-demand issue for higher ed. Of course, the biggest issue in higher ed, and being at a place like Oxford and coming from a place like Cambridge, I think it's important to reflect on this. Higher ed in the Western world and around the world really has been one of the greatest engines of social stratification in how it's reproduced sort of a continuously elite group of people. And so if you take all three of those issues, you have skills bias, technology change, coupled by this huge supply and demand issue, and then the present provision of higher ed that is concentrated on the already well advantaged. And you can see that the problems that we're seeing now with the rise of populist movements everywhere as a result of sort of rapid change and an unequal distribution of the gains of globalization, all of those challenges are going to get much, much worse in the short to medium term future. So onto this sort of landscape came MOOCs, massive open online courses, along with lots of other forms of online education. And they were sort of, trumpeted as this solve, like some way that you could, as long as someone had a laptop or a phone and Wi-Fi, they could access content anywhere in the world from Harvard, Stanford, Cambridge, wherever. And that it would truly sort of democratize elite higher education, which would provide this means for social mobility for lots of formerly excluded groups. So after 6 to 7 years, the empirical evidence is in, and that hypothesis is wildly rejected. 80% of MOOC users are those that already have a college degree. And so instead of reducing educational inequalities, it's actually making them more pronounced. And I just want to pause on that and say that it's not like inherently wrong that college-educated people are continuing to learn. I'm all for that. MOOCs are saving my PhD because they're teaching me how to do some data mining techniques that I don't know how to do, right? So it's not sort of inherently wrong, but if these are supposed to be an agent of broadening educational opportunity, and they're not, I think we should figure out why and try to fix that fast. And then just another brief tangent, if you think about skills-biased technology change and the fact that online learning is presently serving those who are already advantaged, you get this picture of like lawyers, for example, or bankers that are well educated and advantaged, that are basically tired of being lawyers and bankers and want to become product managers or like data scientists. And they're just going from one highly paid sort of lucrative career to another one through this vehicle of online learning. Again, it's sort of not like inherently bad, but it just widens inequality. And if we're concerned about the impact of inequality, we have to be concerned about some of what's driving inequality, I think. So that's the landscape for my work, and I've got like 4 more minutes. Is that right? Okay.
All time. Do you want to maybe show your slide?
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
Presentation 1.
Does this minute count?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Is it yours?
Oh yeah, yep, that's it. So there's a problem with existing MOOC research that I'm trying to contribute to, and so one, I do some data mining techniques looking at how underrepresented groups are using MOOCs, so that the specific behavior patterns of those groups can inform future design, rather than kind of this mean user that is currently being used, which reflects all of these advantaged groups, right? So, and then there's a lot of sociological criticism that's happening of MOOCs that isn't particularly constructive and isn't sort of saying like, here's how we can make them better. So I'm trying to come up with some recommendations for how to make them better. And then I'll end by talking about this slide, because the real contribution of my work is this theoretical framing that I've called hegemonic design bias, which if you can find a more pretentious academic term, that was not my intention, but it just sort of happened to combine all the things that I've seen. Right, so this happens for a few reasons. First, there's this institutional isomorphism, which is a really powerful concept, and it's basically where we are here, Oxford, as the first university in the Western world. Every university since has tried to copy Oxford, right? And so it's this, everyone tries to now be like Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge. It's this institutional isomorphism. These are institutions that sort of derive their prestige based on who they exclude rather than by who they include. And so that contributes to this kind of reproduction of socioeconomic elitism. And who's producing MOOCs? It's these sort of elite universities. So instead of, say, producing a course on English language learning for non-English speakers or remedial math, they make courses for computer science. It's like really cool, but not serving the vast majority of people that don't have a college degree that could use some of these other courses. So there's that, and then MOOCs are just like really sort of bad like teaching. It's like a guy or a woman standing in front of a video and lecturing, and it's not sort of like co-constructive, it's not creative, it's not activating the learner in any meaningful way, which is not a good way to teach those who have sort of had bad educational experiences their whole lives, right? And then the big interesting sort of research and data point is this like early adopter design bias. So I said 80% of users have college degrees, and there's like been 65 million users, right? Which is a lot. That's like a quarter of the total global higher education pool. 80% of them have college degrees. We use these machine learning and like data mining techniques to understand the user behavior patterns, and then we make recommendations how to change future MOOCs based on like the average user behavior patterns. So we are optimizing online learning for groups of people that don't need online learning to be optimized for them. And so I'll just conclude that sort of technology can be part of the answer, but we have to be extremely critical and extremely thoughtful about how we are, creating these technologies. So thank you. Was that 10 minutes?
Yeah. All right, thank you, Mike. Next we'll hear from Margery.
Thank you. And thank you, Mike. That was, I think, really provocative and thoughtful. And what I drew from that was that equity is a real issue around technology, and also that in an uncertain world, MOOCs aren't the saviour for us. I didn't start thinking, or we didn't start thinking about educational technology as a solution, despite what the title I've given the presentation. Can I put it through, or do you have to put it through? Yeah.
I can do this.
Okay, again, please. One of the things, we've got a problem that many of us share in an uncertain world, and that's the next one, and that is the problem of complexity. AKES has got 200 schools across the developing world in 10 different countries. So things aren't the same. Our littlest school is 20 kids in India, our largest is 3,000 in Karachi. 75% of our students in our schools are in rural and remote areas. Next. As I said, 200 schools, 75,000 students, 3,000 teachers. We run from pre-primary to higher secondary. So this is a complex and different environment that is inside a complex and different world again. So I think about, and these are all our students, so I think about these are the ones up here in Uganda, and we heard about Uganda today. A lot of those students aren't going to go on to enjoy a secondary education. So what does education need to do for them? Girls in Pakistan, far north Pakistan, right up against the Afghanistan border. What does an education need to look like for those girls? Tajikistan, Korog down here, these children already speak 3 or 4 languages, but they don't speak English, which is so much part of an education in opportunities in a developing environment. And these are the ones here, go to our nursery in Dubai. Now, their parents are facing such economic issues that they're choosing not to send their children to school till they're 6 or 7. So how do we manage and provide for education for those students? What does a learned person look like in this variety of contexts? Well, that's what they look like. So what we did was we thought, we thought about the world, obviously, as all of us are, that they're growing into it. It's a world where there's lots of technology, there's no doubt about that. But it is uncertain in a whole range of ways. They need to be able to manage technology, they need to be able to use technology, and they certainly need to be able to do that in ethical and moral ways that don't exacerbate the inequity that you talked about, Mike. So there are a range of solutions to this. Do we have, no? So I'm going to have to...
HDMI 2.
No, it's fine. We'll do it with that. But what I need to do is to be able to read some of this. Can I just take that? Thank you. Okay, so the Aga Khan himself has said that in an uncertain world, what is required today, in my view, is an educational approach that nurtures the spirit of anticipation, agility, adaptability, and adventure. I think that's the answer to the question. We're not using words like 21st century skills, but anticipation, agility, adaptability, and adventure. The question is, how do you do that in an uncertain world, in a very, very diverse environment? And so what we did was we asked partners, and UNICEF have used these people as well, we asked our partners, or the innovation unit, to partner with us to think about what we need to do if EdTech is one of the solutions. We've heard relationships is another solution. We've heard that broadening school beyond the walls of school is a solution. But if EdTech is one of the solutions to that problem, then let's have a look what's going on in environments where people have already started to use EdTech well. So we looked at 3 systems, Singapore, New Zealand and Brazil. And then we looked at 9 different programmatic responses, some at public schools, Mwabu, School in the Cloud, 1 billion. And what did we, and tried to draw the lessons from those schools and from those systems for what a system like ours might do. And what we realised is that EdTech really has 3 primary functions, we think. One is to do with equity itself. So EdTech can be a solution for equity. It can compensate for lack of resources, for lack of teacher training, for the issues of rurality and distance. It can also enrich teaching and learning, and we think about that easily. Teachers that use videos, kids that use spreadsheets and databases. It makes and enriches the teaching and learning, and it also evolves the teaching and learning. So never before has personalisation, project-based learning, differentiation had such an opportunity as it does now. However, those things only happen when the EdTech is used well and sensibly and, as you say, cautiously. So what are looking at these sort of 9 case studies and 3 system examples, as well as looking at the research and what experts said, there were 6 things that came up through our research over and over again that you need to pay attention to. One is purpose and problem solving. So we heard it this morning, people talking about things being contextualised. The EdTech has got to solve a problem that's felt locally. There's got to be a purpose for it. Student capability, really important. Can they speak and read the language, or particularly the English that they need to? Do they know, have they got enough digital literacy to actually manipulate the technology that they're using? Teacher capability, not only here are we talking about how to use the hardware and software, but things like how able is the teacher to manipulate, to create information, to use that in the context of their lesson. I'm not going to talk about technological infrastructure, number 4, because we all know about connectivity. But number 5 was the resources. So when things go wrong, what support is there in schools to make it happen and to keep going? And finally, what are the implementation and the impact needs? So there were these 6 elements that must be present and must be thought about in any sort of technology. And finally, when we look across at the report that's been developed for us, and we look at the big messages, I've picked out 3 that I think are most relevant for this conversation. And the first is really following up from what you were saying, Mike. All technology should come with a well-being and an inequity warning label. You know, while there's enormous power for good, there's as much power and potential for real differentiation. The second really big lesson we took from the research work was that we need to focus on adoption, not dissemination. So it's about how the ed tech is used in context, not just about how broadly and quickly we can get stuff out there. And the last is that the impact of technology is linked to the quality of the teaching. So you can have a great piece of tech and you can have a great piece of hardware and software, but if teachers aren't using that well and effectively, then it's not going to have the sorts of impact on equity, enrichment and evolution of the teaching and learning that we think it might. Thank
We were going to try and fix the PowerPoint, but we're good. You can go ahead.
Again?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, good evening and thanks very much. It's been very interesting to listen to you because I will try now to share with you our practical view and how we deal with many of those issues which are actually part of the reality we are facing in our program. ProFuturo is a foundation. We deal with providing quality education through digital means to primary students in places which are at risk of exclusion, understanding by vulnerability, remote areas, areas in conflict, violence, and I mean all the definitions that the UNICEF and the OECD have already defined. ProFuturo is in 23 countries, but the origin of ProFuturo is Latin America because our founders are Telefónica, the big telecom operator from Latin America and Spain, and Fundación Bancaria La Caixa. 14 countries out of those 23 are in Latin America. Brazil is one of our main hubs, and we've learned a lot from them. All this to say that this is not about just copying and pasting, but it helps very much because there are some baseline in coincidences between, for instance, Manaus and what we've seen in Kenya, if I may compare both situations. We are also working in 7 countries in Africa and 2 more in Asia. In Asia, it's Lebanon, actually, and Philippines, quite different situations. Our target is a very ambitious one. We want to reach like 10 million kids, and we started in 2016 by 2020, but we didn't start from scratch because of all inheritance that I'm talking from Fundación Telefónica. We already inherited those the balance of almost 4 million kids who have already been given digital education, mainly through the education of teachers. When ProFuturo is funded, we intended to enhance the solution and make it more integral, if I may say, and try to reach not only the teaching training, but also providing them with the right tools to teach those kids and be able to assess what sort of impact we would be expecting out of that activity. Now, if I can summarize what sort of challenges we've faced so far, the first and the biggest one, in our opinion, has to do with the teachers' education adequacy and the ICT level of uptake, which is really low and very unequal depending on the place that you go. How do we deal with that? We segment the teachers. We do not provide one-size-fits-all type of contents and methodologies, and we have defined different training itineraries. And to be honest, when we started in Africa, we realized that we needed to level up a little bit what we thought it was basic training for those teachers who had been taught in many places in Latin America. So what sort of level up training did we start with? It had to do with just breaking with the fears that normally the resistance to use technology. That's part of the training that we provide, and also leveraging on other practices that we are using in Peru. Teachers record tape different methodologies of training, and then they comment among them what's working and what's not working. That's halfway through a way to use technology, but use it with the purpose of learning and sharing your knowledge with others. And as I said, there are two types of trainings with regards to ICTs: how to use them themselves, and then how to use them in class. And that has to do very much with different methodologies that we are trying to promote. Talking about segmentation, we divide it between what we call the training that is based on the instructional way of teaching, which is basically you provide the lesson to the student and they have a passive attitude because they just receive the information. Now, for those we are providing basic curricula contents, and let me tell you that in ProFuturo we are not trying to compete with the local curricula, and what is more interesting for us is that we're using transversal sort of matters, those who do not need very much to be customized depending on the place. Like, we do not teach literature nor geography or local culture. It has to do with linguistics, which is something in many countries where the English language or French is living with the local language also. A second block that has to do with the STEM itself, science, what it stands for, but basically it's maths, a little bit of programming, and science. Again, it is very transversal. And you can match that with the local curricula, but it's not our intention to match 100%. We realize that local authorities, education authorities, expect a minimum of correlation between the contents we provide and what they have in the formal curricula, but our final ultimate intention is to provide with methodology, which is how do we teach differently the same type of matters, and then the content comes with it, embedded, but it's not the content itself, it's the methodology. Let me give you an example. For instance, Jump Math. They won a Wise Prize. They're Canadians, probably you've heard about them. It's a different way of teaching and developing the way teachers teach math. That is what we are trying to embed, and that leads with the traditional mathematics formal curricula for teachers. There's a second level that we expect is a guided teaching to them, which is in our vision, it is when the teacher is learning at the same time and with the student. So they become guidings, like the STEAM in a box. It's another program that we are developing, which has to do with the challenge that many teachers have, that they're not savvy on technology. And you've mentioned that before. The technology, well structured, the methodology can deal with that, can somehow substitute that flows from the teacher, and the teacher is learning at the same time the student is doing so. And at the end of the itinerary, what we expect the teacher to become, no matter whether they come from, is that they're completely autonomous in terms of letting the student become self-guiding their own teaching path. I mean, this is a challenge because normally there's natural resistance in these local environments to keep the things the way they are. And so you need to prove that those curricula contents that you're providing are working, are fine, and you have to introduce step by step, very slowly, different methodologies because you do believe in them, and then you have to prove, you have to measure. Another challenge, how do we prove that this is working? There's not a lot already done in measuring the impact of transformation education in the world. I mean, we're measuring lots of commercial and business items, but education is not that easy. How do we measure competences? And that's something that we don't have the answer yet, but we're working on it. And we are leveraging on the department, the specialists in Telefonica who are dealing with big data for social good. And so we define some use cases like talent identification is just an example, or recommendation based on the outcome, the performance of some students with certain content. So data analytics is another area that we want to invest a lot. Another challenge that we faced, this is not just about teaching once, and as you said, not diffusion, but adoption. And for that, when it's about implementing a solution, that has to do with providing local on-site support. I mean, you cannot just leave them and hope for the best, because probably there are lots of questions and issues and they need someone nearby, otherwise they'll give up. And you would have invested a lot of money and you will get not the return that you are expecting. So what we do, we provide local support that is coming from the local education community, and then remote support also to deal with incidences, technical or pedagogical. There are some other issues related to technology, but I think that you've already discussed this before, dealing with connectivity. For instance, we are a telecoms company, and what we're doing is that we are sort of accompanying all the investigation, the research that Telefonica is doing on how to provide coverage to remote areas. And we are partnering actually with Facebook in new network, access technologies for LTE in order to provide to remote and very low populated areas in the Amazonias, in order to make sure that we're getting there. But what if we don't have connectivity? Is it possible to provide digital education? We think we can. And what we do is the platforms that we offer can work off and online. So strictly speaking, I only need the online access to, upload all the activity that is being done and recorded, stored in that platform, which is the teacher's laptop, the server. But I don't need to be permanently connected. If I could, that would be much better because you can navigate, but otherwise we have a solution that stores all those methodologies and contents, and you can work offline. Regarding the access to the power, again, that has to do with digital innovation, solar platforms, and all that you probably have already discussed of. And very important, another two issues, and I'll finish. One has to do with security. When you are providing with technology, how do you ensure that that's going to be part of the school and be used by all the students? Now, the key, in our opinion, has to do with the community engagement. And we have the experience of some tablets being stolen. Kids take them home when they should be kept at the school. It's the community of parents and teachers all interested in keeping this as a treasure that deals with the situation. So security has to do very much with the engagement of the community. And just to finalize, we know already that partnering is key to sustain technology, because whatever we provide them with, we can donate equipment, but the equipment is gonna deteriorate. So who's gonna substitute? You need to be in line very much with the public policies if they exist in those countries. Now, engaging with the local governments, it's not an easy issue for us because we are well positioned in Latin America. We are new in Africa and Asia, and that's why partnering for us is key. And we work in alliance with some other players, some technical, academic, and NGOs who know very well the domain, the environment. Okay, so these are in brief the sort of challenges that we are facing and how we are tackling each and every one of them. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sofia and Mike and Margery. Maybe now we can open it up to discussion, but if the three of you want to respond to one another first, and then others can kind of jump in.
I think we said similar things actually, from different perspectives. Yeah.
Okay, well maybe we can remind us of a question that we had, which was, if the promise of technology is unmet, what is the future for EdTech? Something along those lines.
How might we fulfill on the promise of EdTech?
How might we fulfill on the promise of EdTech? We can open up to the broader group for any responses.
Sofia, when can we go to Nairobi? It really very, very eye-opening. All those three presentations were really excellent. I particularly like they kind of complement each other. So, looking at the higher equity issue at a higher level, where the resource issue is, and then providing some of the experiences of Aga Khan, and then looking specifically on what we're doing. So I really enjoyed all the three presentations. In the context of Kenya, I think we are a bit ahead in a sense of technology and so on. For example, the government of Kenya has bought 1 million digital equipment that has gone across the schools. We are currently working with Shiraz and my colleagues in UNICEF to improve connectivity as well. We really strongly believe that digital access to digital is really a way to go to improve quality of learning outcome, and so forth. But we are beginning to merit that. So some of the challenges you stated for us are actually opportunities. So it's actually, we're looking for partnership to improve. So what you stated as challenge in terms of sustainability and so on, I think in the Kenya context is it's more of opportunity. So